My phone says it's 9:01.
It's 9 o'clock. All right, Jerry, can we call the meeting to order? We'll call the meeting to order. First item on the agenda is approval of the October 8th, 2018 minutes. Did everybody get a chance to review? If you did, is there any corrections? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve.
I so move to approve.
Motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion is second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. Jerry, Sonny's here. Oh, I didn't know if you saw him walking in. Approval of today's agenda. I'd entertain a motion for approval of today's agenda.
So moved.
I'll second.
Motion second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. For the public, just so you know, if you'd like to get a copy of today's agenda on the back bookshelf, you're welcome to it. That way you can follow along with all the items that are on our consent agenda items and our regular items. PJ.
All right.
Consent.
PJ Conover, Director, Planning Department, consent agenda, there's quite a few, so settle in. The following items have been placed on the consent agenda for action to be taken on all items in accordance with staff's recommendation by a single vote. Any item may be removed from the consent agenda by any planning commissioner, staff member, or audience member for separate consideration. The findings of the Planning Commission or recommendations to the Pennington County Board of Commissioners will make final decisions. Item 3, conditional use permit 1427 for Wayne and Phyllis Krell to review a single-wide manufactured home to be used as a permanent residence in the suburban residential district. Staff recommends approval of the extension of conditional use permit 1427 with 7 conditions. Item 4, conditional use permit review 1429 for Isaac Malsom to review the use of an existing private airstrip to be used for the applicant's personal aircraft in a general agriculture district. Staff recommends approval of the extension of conditional use permit 1429 with 7 conditions. Item 5, conditional use permit review 1525 for Rushmore Shadows LLC to review a recreational resort with the addition of 45 RV sites on the subject property in the Highway Service District. Staff recommends to continue the review of conditional use permit 1525 to the December 17th, 2018 Planning Commission meeting. Item 6, conditional use permit review 1528 for Michelle and Erica Radke, Kathleen Call as the owner, to review a single-wide mobile home to be used as a ranch hand residence on the subject property in a general agriculture district. Staff recommends approval of the extension of conditional use permit 1528 with 7 conditions. Item 7, conditional use permit review 1630 for Carol and Paul Neiman to review an accessory structural pole barn prior to a primary structure on a subject property in a general agriculture district. Staff recommends approval of conditional use permit 1630 with 10 conditions. Item 8, conditional use permit review 1635 for Eldon Nygaard to review a non-lighted off-premise sign within 1,500 feet of a residential zoning district or dwelling in a highway service district. Staff recommends approval of the extension of conditional use permit 1635 with 6 conditions. Item 9, conditional use permit review 1727 for Beverly Sears to review an existing 12 by 12 structure to be used as a single-family residence in the suburban residential district. Staff recommends to continue the review of conditional use permit 1727 to the November 26, 2018 Planning Commission meeting with 2 conditions. Item 10, conditional use permit 1738 for Daniel Johnson, Highmark Properties, to review a multifamily dwelling in a general agriculture district. Staff recommends to continue the review of conditional use permit 1738 to the January 14, 2019 Planning Commission meeting. Item 11, conditional use permit review 1739 for Colonial Pines Sanitary District. Jim Martin is the agent. To review an office building on the subject property serve as the Colonial Pines Hill Sanitary District in a suburban residential district. Staff recommends approval of the extension of conditional use permit 1739 with 10 conditions. Item 12, conditional use permit review 1747 for Harriet Kelly to review a recreational vehicle to be used as temporary living quarters on the subject property during the summer months in the low-density residential district. Staff recommends approval of the extension of conditional use permit 1747 with 10 conditions. Item 13, construction permit review 1713 for Western Construction Incorporated to review a portable asphalt batch plant on the subject property and to level and grade approximately 26 acres with berms and dust control ponds implemented on site. Staff recommends to end conditional use permit construction permit 1713 with the applicant's concurrence. Item 14, construction permit review 1714 for Cody Shad to review the construction of a road constructed outside of the section line right-of-way and to satisfy a condition of approval for CS 1602. Staff recommends to continue the review of construction permit 1714 to the November 13th, 2018 Planning Commission meeting. Item 15, telecommunication facility permit review 0904 for Alltel Communications. Robert Baker Revocable Trust is the landowner to review a 190-foot monopine communication tower in a general agriculture district. Staff recommends approval of the extension of telecommunication facility permit TC 0904 with 9 conditions. Item 16, conditional use permit review 1840 for Eli Rodolph Investments to allow an accessory structure, a pole barn building prior to a principal structure on the subject property in a highway service district. Staff recommends approval of conditional use permit 1840 with 13 conditions. Item 17, minor plat 1831 for Perry and Vicky Van Newkirk to combine 2 lots to create lot 47 revise of Burns Placer MS 697. Staff recommends approval of minor plat 1831 with 11 conditions. Item 18, conditional use permit 1838 for Daniel Johnson, Highmark Properties LLC to allow a multifamily dwelling residence with separate units to be used as separate vacation home rentals, Unit 1 and Unit 2 in a general agriculture district. Staff recommends to continue conditional use permit 1838 to the December 3rd, 2018 Planning Commission meeting.
Any items that staff would like to pull?
Item 13 only.
Any items from the membership? Seeing none, any audience members like to pull any of those items that were just read off of the consent agenda so they can be dealt with individually? All right. That would leave us with items 3 through 12, 14 through 18 for the consent agenda. If I can get a motion to approve the consent agenda of those items, 3 through 12, 14 to 18.
I would so move.
Motion by Jim,
Second.
second by Sonny. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. Item number 13.
Item 13 is construction permit review 1713 for Western Construction Incorporated. Staff recommended originally to end construction permit 1713 with the applicant's concurrence. After communication with the applicant today, they're requesting that it not end and be continued. So we're just simply asking for a continuation to the next Planning Commission meeting, which would be November 13th.
So the recommendation is to continue to November 13th meeting.
Then we'll go from there.
Any questions for staff? Any members of the audience like to speak on this item? If not, I'd entertain a motion to continue this item to the November 13 Planning Commission.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Item number 19.
Good morning, Cassie Volstead, Assistant Planning Director. Item 19 is conditional use permit 1839. This is a request to allow an existing single-family residence to be used as a vacation home rental in a low-density residential district. The applicant is Michael Busetti. The agent is Rob Livingston. They're both here in the audience today if you have questions for them. As this property exists today, it is zoned low-density residential district. It's 2.92 acres. Access is off of Gold Mountain Loop via an existing access easement, and there is no special flood hazard area on this property, and it currently contains a single-family residence with an addition and an on-site wastewater treatment system. This request for a vacational rental was routed through the interdepartmental review process, and nothing of significant concern came back. The applicant has complied with all of the application submittal requirements, including floor plans, a completed application, approval from DENR, which they received in June. They do have a South Dakota Department of Health lodging license, which expires on December 31st of this year. And the local contact is Mike Busetti. It's my understanding that he lives right next door. And DENR has approved this vacational rental for a maximum overnight occupancy of 6 people. This is currently a 2-bedroom residence. So staff is recommending approval of conditional use permit 1839 with 16 conditions.
Any questions for staff?
I guess.
Go ahead, Sandy. You look like you were thinking about it for a
Well,
minute.
I am thinking about it. Maybe it's a general question, but how do you decide which items go on the consent agenda and which ones are dealt with individually?
That
I mean, you're recommending this be approved, and so I don't understand how you differentiate.
Usually if it's the first time something's being heard, especially vacation home rentals with their histories, those are not gonna be on consent. Reviews, as you will see, will usually be on consent. What really the determining factor is if we receive phone calls from the public or if there's any letters of complaint.
I see.
That'll automatically kick it off.
Okay, yeah, were there letters of complaint on this?
Not on this one, but like PJ said, usually vacation home rentals, the first
Sure.
time we don't put them on consent because they have a history of sometimes being contentious.
I understand. Well, good, well, thank you for the clarification.
All right, any further members have any questions? If not, is there any members of the audience that would like to speak on this item? Seeing none, current recommendation is to approve conditional use permit 1839 with the following 16 conditions. Is there a motion to approve?
Move approval.
Motion
I'll second.
and second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. Takes us to item number 20.
All right, item number 20, this is a layout plat request. This is plat 1833 to create Lot 3 revised of Seven Oaks subdivision. The applicant is Stephen Schur. The surveyor is Baseline Surveying. So this property is right on the Meade County, Pennington County border. Currently, as it exists, it is two separate properties. Lot 1, Les Schur, dedicated right-of-way of Seven Oaks subdivision, is Zone General Agriculture District. It's 0.64 acres and currently vacant. Lot 3 of Seven Oaks subdivision, which is the larger lot, is also Zone General Ag. It is 1.01 acres and currently contains a single-family residence and an on-site wastewater treatment system. There is no special flood hazard area on this property. As they are proposing to do this, they are wanting to make Lot 3 revised of Seven Oaks subdivision, which would be 1.648 acres. It does not meet the minimum lot size requirement for general agriculture districts, so a lot size variance or a rezone will be required through this process. And it will contain all of the existing structures. The proposed plat also creates a 66-foot wide private access and utility easement across Lot 3 revised to serve Lot 1 revised and Lot 4, which are located to the north in Meade County. This was routed through the interdepartmental review process, and a few things of note did come back. The Register of Deeds commented that there are some things that need to be corrected on the plat, including removal of landowner names, addresses, phone numbers, and parcel numbers, removal of the plat book and page references for the existing lots, removal of the building drawings, and this solid gray area down here that says previously dedicated public right-of-way. The Register of Deeds noted that that does not generally copy well and recreate well when people make copies of plats, so she would prefer that it be hatched or something along those lines. The Department of Equalization did note that the two existing lots are actually in different fire tax districts. One of them is in the Doty Fire Tax District and one of them is in the Blackhawk Fire Tax District. So in order to consolidate these lots, they will have to contact one of those fire departments and annex themselves into the other one so that they're in the same fire tax district, or the Department of Equalization said that they have to keep them separate lots for taxation purposes. And Emergency Services also commented that the existing addresses are addressed off of, let's see, where are they addressed off of? Off of Potter Road, I believe, yes. And Emergency Services is stating that they likely need to be addressed off of Seven Oaks Trail because that is a platted road, and as you can see, their access actually comes off of Seven Oaks Trail. Potter Road ends over here, and Seven Oaks Trail starts over here. So it may need to be readdressed depending on what the addressing coordinator and Emergency Services say. However, these seem to be fairly minor things that can be corrected, so staff does not see any sort of significant issue with moving forward with this plat since it decreases density. So staff is recommending approval of layout plat 1833 with 15 conditions.
Any questions for staff?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Jim.
What about this annexation into a different fire district? Who makes that judgment? And is it the fire district? Is it the county
No, it's my understanding that it's the fire departments. The Department of Equalization said that they need to contact the fire department to do that. I don't believe the county has any sort of say in it. It's just the fire departments have to figure it out, and you just have to annex yourself into one or the other.
That's not generally a problem, or have you faced this before?
This is actually the first time I've ever had this issue before, so I guess I'm not really certain. I don't know what sort of impacts it has on, the fire departments themselves, how much
Just
tax
wondering if there was
dollars or
some
anything
kind of,
like that they
some
lose.
kind of funding issue with
Yeah.
with the fire departments or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, I don't know if there's anything we can do about that, but I was curious about what the procedure was, and I'll be interested to know how that comes out, I mean, and how it's affected. So that was my only question.
All that has to be resolved before it can move forward, right?
Right, yes, there is a condition in there that they do have to, that one of the existing lots be annexed into a different fire tax district so that they're both in the same one before they can move forward with the plating process.
Right. Any further questions for Cassie? Any members of the audience like to speak on this item? All right, seeing none, current recommendation is approval of layout plat PL 1833 with the following 15 conditions. Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Sunny, motion?
Second?
Second by Jim. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. Item 21.
Item 21 is layout plat 1832 to create tract 1 of Rulin Ranch subdivision. The applicants are Larry and Lenora Rulin, surveyor and engineers DC Scott Surveying, and the applicant representatives are in the audience today if you have any questions. Subject properties are 47.63 acres. Let's see here, let's go right there. Okay. So essentially what we have are these two existing lots right now. The lot on the left side abutting there, I-90, only appears to have that one large building, while the lot on the right has a larger building to it. What they're looking to do is kind of redo some of the interior lot lines of those properties. What I'd like to do is refer to Lot A, which would be the lot on the left, and then Lot B, which is the larger lot on the right. Lot A is currently zoned General Agriculture District, is 47.75 acres, takes access off of 239th Street, and there is no special flood hazard area on that property. There do appear to be some structures on that property, some that may or may not have building permits. Going through our history and through Department of Equalization records, we haven't found any permits for that. It's not unusual during a layout plat to discover these things, but they are listed as conditions of things that need to be fixed as we move forward. This property also has a conditional use permit on it from 2000, which is number 20, which is for a roping and riding arena, which was last reviewed in 2003 and is only reviewed on a complaint basis and has not been reviewed since 2003. Also had a conditional use permit from 2013 for a concrete batch plant and aggregate stockpile, which was ended on September 14, 2015, as the batch plant was no longer needed. Lot B, the larger one on the right, is also zoned General Agriculture District, is 80 acres, also takes access off of 239. In your staff reports on page 4 of 7, there is a considerable list of structures that are from Department of Equalization records. Those are all considered legal nonconforming because of their dates as they precede 1994. And also the single-wide mobile home, the 16 by 80, has a valid building permit from 2014. This was routed through the interdepartmental review. The only item of concern that came back were a couple things, not really concerns. West River Electric would like to have a meeting with the applicants or landowners or the agents prior to the next step, just to talk about the electrical issues and the possible easements on the property. The addressing coordinator commented that there appears to be that larger item, that larger structure with the white roof, because it's going to be on its own lot and also because of the size of it and its distance from the single-family residence, should be addressed, and also that address should be posted properly. The ordinance officer commented on some of the unpermitted buildings. Register of Deeds said that the proposed legal description is acceptable, the plat heading is acceptable, and the certificates appear to be the required certificates per state statute. Comments from the Department of Equalization were concerned about the use of the word subdivision because they could possibly lose the ag status for assessment purposes, and recommended that they speak with Joe Doran, who's the ag assessor for Department of Equalization. The agent and I believe also landowners are aware of this and are looking at different avenues for naming the new plats. As far as the analysis goes, the proposed new tracts and remaining unplatted property both meet or exceed the required minimum lot size for general agriculture districts, so no lot size variances or rezonings will be needed. For the purposes of the layout plat, staff finds no issues with the applicant's request, as the layout plat is an informal preliminary review of the proposed subdivision. And with that, staff, or not the proposed subdivision, I should change that, proposed new properties. Staff recommends approval of layout plat 1832 with 9 conditions.
Any questions for staff? All right. Any members of the audience like to speak on this item? Come forward, sir. State your name.
Good morning. My name is Dean Scott. I'm the surveyor. And I just wanted to point out, just so you're clear, all of the land included in this tract and the parcels that PJ's referred to as Lot A and Lot B are actually all unplatted land, and the Rulins own beyond this too. So this is just one tract that's going to be platted in the corner of a larger unplatted half section, more or less. All right, and the owners and the buyers have no issues. They want me to visit with West River Electric to. Well, actually, I may have the buyer too, but we're going to work with West River Electric to identify where they want to run the pole line, because West River Electric prefers to have a 25-foot wide easement if they're running an overhead line. All right, so rather than putting a 25-foot easement around the entire perimeter of everything I plat, I think it's better to stick with the normal 8-foot easement, because that's usually adequate for underground power also. It's only when West River Electric anticipates that they are going to run an overhead line that they want 25 feet for that. And I think it's better that they go ahead and analyze where they might actually run the pole line. And we can do either one of two things. We can either put the easement on the plat before you see it again, and it'll identify where they intend to build the pole line, or we'll leave it as is, and at some point when construction happens, if West River Electric is comfortable, that they'll be given a 25-foot easement for whatever they intend to build. The only thing that I understand is proposed for this, that is a riding arena and an enclosed building right there, and that's what it's been used for the last 15 years or so.
Yes.
Yeah, right there. And as I understand it, there may be a residential structure somewhere over in the northeastern part of the property, likely maybe here.
In the future.
Yeah, in the future. So I'm thinking that the only pole line that may be necessary would be to serve that. All right. They do hope to remain ag, so they've also asked me to deal with visiting with the Department of Equalization to come up with a way to make sure that it remains ag, because it is used for ag in other ways, and it's larger than 40 acres.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Dean?
You'll coordinate everything with the Western Electric people?
Yep, and I think we can probably get it done within a week or so. So I'm sure we'll have it worked out before you see it again.
All right. Any further questions? Thank you very much.
So thank you.
Any other audience members like to speak on behalf of this item? Seeing none, the current recommendation is approval of layout plat 1832 with the following 9 conditions. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, no. Motion carries. Item 22, please.
Item 22 is conditional use permit request 1837 to allow an RV campground with an alpaca guest ranch, store, and fiber mill in the general agricultural district. The applicants and agent are Computer Alpaca's guest ranch and fiber mill, Glenn and Debbie Lepp. The subject property is 61 acres and is currently zoned general agriculture district. This was before you at the last meeting, but was just continued for a couple weeks so we could spend some more time talking with the applicant. We have been in regular contact with the applicant throughout this entire process, through the review process from other agencies and with the interdepartmental staff, with our staff, and also with Scott Hippel from the state. Some concerns were identified on the property. These were discussed with the applicants, Mr. Lepp, and what has been decided is instead of going for everything that they've requested, that he would like to move forward with at least a request before you for this alpaca store. It doesn't mean that the concerns of the property don't need to be fixed. It is just moving this through the process so that he, can see some light at the end of the tunnel and know that at least one of the things that he's requesting can go. So with that, it was routed through the interdepartmental review. The environmental planner had some concerns about the septic system, and so did the Scott Hippel from the Department of Environmental and Natural Resources. There's still some things that need to be worked out on that between them and the applicant as far as what is inside that blue building and the use of some of the facilities in there. The environmental planning supervisor indicated that there is Zone A, special flood hazard area on the subject property, and construction in there requires floodplain development permits to be approved. The county ordinance enforcement officer did notice that there were some unpermitted structures on the property. However, through some communication with the applicant, some of them do appear that they can be moved every 180 days. They are either undersized where they don't require a building permit, or because they are located in a floodplain or flood hazard area, if they're moved every 180 days, we don't require floodplain development permits for those. So I sat down with the applicant and his son, I believe, and we identified the items of concern, and even after this meeting, there'll be some more work that needs to be done on those. With the conditional use permit, there are 5 factors that need to be considered by the board. The first factor is before you on the screens. It appears that allowing the conditional use permit for the alpaca store, there should be no negative effects on the use and enjoyment of other properties in the vicinity, as this property is currently visited because of the alpacas that are on site as it is. Staff cannot predict the impact the conditional use permit will have on property values in the area. The second item, staff believes that by allowing this conditional use permit, it should not affect the normal and orderly development or improvement of any surrounding vacant property in the area. The third item, which is on the screen, access is provided off of Highway 44 via an existing approach, and the property is served by a private on-site wastewater treatment system and a well, and it appears that all necessary facilities are in place. The fourth item, which is covered up there, I don't know if I can move that, that according to Section 310 of the Pennington County zoning ordinance, the 2 off-street parking spaces are required for a single-family residence, bless you, and it appears there is more than ample space to meet the requirements for the subject property. The last item to consider, the proposed conditional use permit by its very nature may not produce limited odor, fumes, dust, noise, or vibrations, or intrusive light, and the applicant should take care so that the proposed use does not create any of the above listed elements in amount that would constitute a nuisance. As far as the analysis, let me just take care of this here real quick. As far as the analysis during the initial comment period, as mentioned, several responses were received by staff that required further investigation, and we've had several meetings and conversations with the applicants. The applicant has chosen, as I mentioned, to move forward with the request for the alpaca store only, and the applicant has indicated a maximum occupancy per day of 20 people, which includes the staff to run the store. With that, staff would recommend approval of conditional use permit 1837 for the alpaca store with 12 conditions.
Any questions for staff? Go ahead, Kathy.
I have a question, and this really isn't exactly pertinent right now to this one, but I'm just curious. Well, these are the kind of businesses and so on that'll fall under the animal keeping ordinance once that goes through?
Yes,
the
this would be
system?
under 204G. It would be now, but since that is technically on hold until everything that's not in there
But
right now.
will these kind of operations be, I mean, will there be some sort of a grandfathered status, or will it require the potential for some change in operations here? Or how does that work when you have something existing and a new ordinance comes in?
Usually they're grandfathered, but I think it'd be probably a case-to-case basis, so probably both of probably a yes to both of your questions is, yes, there's grandfathering, and yes, things will be needing permits.
Okay.
Michelle Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office. Just to further respond to your question, Commissioner Johnson, land use itself is grandfathered in, so arguably if a particular parcel of property has chickens or has alpacas, that use will be grandfathered in. However, it does not mean that reasonable regulations cannot be imposed, such as perhaps maybe the size of the chicken coop or those types of reasonable regulations. And then, of course, once that use changes, then the legal nonconforming status would be
course.
lost.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thanks for the update.
Yes. Well,
Sonny,
they're certainly cute little creatures.
It was interesting reading.
Yeah, it was.
Sonny, you have a question?
BJ says 12 conditions, but I see 13. Was one removed, or is that a typo?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. One was added and not corrected. So staff would recommend approval of conditional use permit 1837 with 13 conditions. Thank you.
Good
sir.
eye, Sonny. Any other questions for staff? Any members of the audience like to speak on behalf of this item? Seeing none, current recommendation is approval of conditional use permit 1837 for the alpaca store with the following 13 conditions. Is there a motion to approve?
I so move.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. That takes us to item 23.
Item 23, County Board Report. The Board of Commissioners concurred with the Planning Commission's recommendation from the October 16, 2018 Planning Commission meeting. The second reading of Major Plan Unit Development Amendment for Catherine Sapinski for a vacation home rental, which is the VHR in the PUD. That was approved 3-2.
Okay. Any questions for staff or for PJ? All right, item number 24, items from the public. Any members of the public have anything for us? All right, item number 25, items from staff.
25, we did add a D to this, just so you know. Item A, the 2018 Planning, South Dakota Planners Conference in Huron. There was about 80, 85 attendance there. Most of the governing board is East River, so it's kind of interesting to be up there. Never been in Huron before, nice little town. And my GPS took me through the back roads all the way back down to I-90. So, wow, there's a lot of land out there. I didn't know we had such big ag operations in the state as we do. Was asked to give a presentation on short-term rentals, which is basically vacation home rentals. It was well-attended, had about 37 people there. There were, when I asked the question, how many of you have VHR regulations on the books? Only 2 places raised their hand, Watertown and the county of Lawrence County. And then I asked how many people have VHRs in their communities, and only 2 raised their hands. And I said, no, you should all raise your hands because you have them and you don't even know it. But it was, I guess, vacation home rentals are becoming a bigger deal, not just in the Black Hills where most of them are concentrated, here in Deadwood and Lawrence and Meade. But other communities are having great concern with them. They're taking on the term VRBOs, kind of like Kleenex, which is a brand, but everybody's calling them Kleenexes now. People are starting to refer to VHRs as VRBOs, which is actually a company that puts out advertisements for how to rent it. So does Airbnb, and so does HomeAway. So if you hear VRBOs, you're probably usually talking about VHRs, but there's been a few requests for our actual ordinance so people can work off of it, also copies of Lawrence County's. As usual, Pennington County is kind of leading the way in what's going on, and people want to know how we're dealing with it. So it was a good conference, though, otherwise. The Board of Commissioners have elected to have special meetings on December 10th and/or also December 11th. That's kind of right off what you guys were discussing from before with your special meeting as far as to hear the Kroll mining permit and the construction permits.
Are they expecting it to go to 2 days, or did they just block 2 days just in case?
I would ask the commissioner sitting to your left.
Lloyd? Because it says and, or. I'm just wondering, Lloyd.
To do 2 days just in case.
Okay.
And this puts pressure on the planning commission to make a decision on your one hearing. Because if you guys can't make a decision on that date, that changes everything. So kudos to you guys. Michelle?
Michelle Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office. If I might add,
Go ahead.
we have, the Planning Department has sent a letter to all the property owners within a half-mile radius, as well as the tribal historical preservation officers, requesting that requesting their attendance at the November 14th meeting, but also if they're unable to attend, requesting that they forward by a reasonable date, which I believe is November 7th by 4 p.m., any written comments they would like the commission to consider, as well as any documentation. That way you may review in advance and engage in a meaningful discussion on the 14th. The hope is that a decision may be made by this planning commission. With that being said, that at the end of that day, if the planning commission feels it's unable to make a decision or needs further information, certainly we would encourage the commission to continue the hearing in order to allow all public comment. But the hope is that we will be able to entertain all public comment on that date, and that the commission will be able to make a decision on that date, so that then the matter, your recommendation, may move forward to the Board of Commissioners. With that in mind too, if inevitably people will come forward with additional documents for your consideration, my recommendation at that time would be, if you need to take an hour recess for lunch or to consider those documents, go ahead and take that recess and then reconvene to move forward on that date with the hearing. We also are advertising, so it's very clear, the two dates, and it will be published this way. The hearing, the initial hearing before the board, is December 10th. A hearing will only be held on the 11th in the event the board needs additional time to consider further comment and make a decision. We do not want to mislead the public into thinking that there will absolutely be two hearing dates, because otherwise the situation will be someone will come forward and say, I was not heard, I appeared on the 11th, no one was here. So we're publishing it in the agenda as well as in the newspaper to make it very clear that the hearing before the Board of Commissioners is on the 10th, and there will be a hearing on the 11th, only in the event the board was unable to make a decision on the 10th.
Okay.
Michelle
And/or.
puts it very elegantly.
So there you go. That clarifies what that and/or means for me.
And the only other thing that we did is they came up with 9 o'clock, just same as you guys did, because they were given the commission was given the option of maybe considering nighttime, like as you guys did. They chose the same thing as to do 9 o'clock. So
Okay. Any further questions? Oh, go ahead, Kathy.
I'm just looking at the calendar here, and the weekend prior is a holiday weekend. It's a Veterans Day weekend, and so this really doesn't affect anybody, but I'll be gone. I'll be traveling that weekend. And so I'm just wondering about when we expect to get the materials, because I have a hunch this is something that we need to read over very, very carefully. And the comments don't come in until the 7th, you said, but will we receive the other type of information from the staff prior to that?
I can discuss that with Michelle and also Brittany, who's writing the staff report. I know the application for this permit is quite extensive as well.
Yeah, I'll bet. So I just would like
We'll
to
get it
put
to
in
you
a
as soon as we can.
plug that we can get that a little bit in advance.
Yep.
And then the other thing is, I just want to agree wholeheartedly with what you mentioned, Michelle, about if we get additional comments, reading them on the fly is just not very productive. And so I think taking a break of whatever time we need to read those thoroughly and carefully is really a good idea.
I was already thinking of that, and it was a good point to point that out ahead of time. And I was thinking that even as we're going, I might ask for all those comments at the beginning of the meeting, so we can have them set aside, and then say there's going to be a time we're going to take a recess during this, so that we can at least read all those extra documents that were presented. That way, we don't take a break, go to lunch, review some documents, and come back, and then other people have got other documents they want us to read. I'm going to ask for them before we take that recess, is what's already spinning in my mind. So.
And hopefully that will be minimized by inviting documents and written comment to be submitted in advance. And Commissioner Johnson, when will you be leaving on your travels?
Well, I leave on the Thursday morning for some,
The 8th?
yeah.
The 8th?
But I mean, I can get emails and so on, so it's not like I'm not available, but it's just that, time to really read carefully and thoughtfully will be somewhat limited, but I'll be back on Sunday, so I have Monday and,
Well, we could make, and we will, we'll make every effort, the staff and I, to have the staff report ready to go on the 7th. And that way, anything that's submitted the afternoon of the 7th by 4 p.m., we can put together and hopefully
that'd be good.
perhaps have it in your box and you can pick it up on your way out of.
I
Yeah.
know the
Town.
staff report's already been started.
Okay.
That's how
Yeah, well, I'll have
extensive.
to have it by email because I leave on a really early flight out on Thursday morning. So, but email's always fine.
Okay, very good.
And then PJ, is my issue number D, or should I bring it up now?
I think it'd be separate.
Okay, thank you.
I get one more.
Go ahead, Lloyd.
Michelle, just procedurally, I think this is kind of an exception to take written comments the day of the meeting. From my understanding, from when I was in Pierre and taking some of the training classes, is we need to have all the written comment in before the documents are presented, or at least a day, 24 hours before, so we could have that review. Because, I mean, I think it's good that you're saying take an hour to review it, because all of a sudden you get, this happened at our last meeting, someone come up and presented something. We really have no way to check it out and evaluate the information that they gave us, because some of it needed some research and so forth. But I was just under the understanding it's hard to consider it the day of, because you can't really follow up on it. But
Well, and PJ might be able to address this because this issue was discussed at in Huron at the State Planning Commission meeting, but I have not had an opportunity to review the commission bylaws or the board bylaws, and I don't know if there are any in place yet for the board. I believe there's been some work on creating some
Yes.
bylaws for the board. Those bylaws should perhaps specifically state that the commission and/or the board will not consider any information after a particular date and time for that reason, that it's very unfair to the board and the commission and this commission to have to try and read these things on the fly. And then that results in a lot of continuances, quite frankly, because you haven't had a chance to read and you want to be fully informed. With that being said, until we're able to amend our bylaws and take a look at those bylaws, we don't want to create a situation where someone's going to come forward and say that this commission and/or the board did not fully consider all information. That's why I'm recommending a recess if necessary, and of course, if necessary, continuance. But, obviously, we want to move things forward on an informed basis, and so sometimes you can move forward, sometimes you can't. You'll have to have a continuance.
Without being there, you nailed the conversation. That's exactly what I was talking about.
Yeah,
It's all about the bylaws.
our precedence is to get, stuff on our desk here at the beginning of the meeting, and so I think that it would be really dangerous and ill-advised to change that precedent, for this particular hearing. And, really in reality, talking to people out there, sometimes maybe they should, but they don't really know what's going to be on the agenda until the agenda comes out, which sometimes is Thursday. And then sometimes they don't get around to looking at it till Friday. And then it's the weekend, and then it's Monday. So, it's the timing is not so good to, so to really say, okay, we can't accept any comments after Friday, let's say, we'd have to get those agendas out earlier. And, so it's really a little bit more complex than that. So I think for this time, we shouldn't change our practice.
And I think the overriding concern should always be allowing public comment. As I said, there's also the issue of moving matters forward in a timely manner. manner and avoiding unnecessary continuance. But I think in a lot of cases, taking a brief recess
Yeah.
to look at those documents that are presented the morning of is a reasonable solution to that problem.
Well, I agree with you, but I think public, you got to evaluate what we're going to get. If it's public comment of a concern, that's no big deal. But when somebody brings they try to say some different evidence or some different stuff that needs research, I think we need to explain to them that there was plenty of time to turn it in beforehand than wait until the last minute. Public comments and concerns are very well, I think we should hear those, and I think we do, but some of the stuff that becomes technical and they're requesting judgments on certain things, they've got plenty of time to come up with that, and they should give us plenty of time to, and I think once that, we get these rules figured out, we'll be a little more.
Any further questions for PJ? Or Michelle? Oh,
Mr. Chair, given the way the conversation's gone, I think we'll just take D off and just insert it here into C. It's our understanding that there are some citizens that have reached out to some planning commissioners asking for specific meetings to discuss the Kroll permits. Michelle's going to address that for you.
There's a couple issues that have been presented. At the last meeting, Commissioner Rundy inquired about conflict of interest, so I thought this was a perfect opportunity to discuss that issue a little bit further because it does tie into the issue of ex parte communications that has been presented. There's various types of conflicts of interest. The first and obvious one is where a decision, and maybe I should back up. When we're talking about conflict of interest, we're talking about matters that are quasi-judicial in nature. And to dumb that down is just basically, is this a decision that's going to impact property use immediately? A variance, a conditional use permit, or in this case, the mining applications that have been submitted by Kroll. So we're talking about quasi-judicial. We're not talking about when you're passing an ordinance or a legislative matter. And if you have any questions, jump in. So that's kind of the distinction. But with regard to conflict of interest, you have your direct pecuniary interest, such as, does this decision benefit my property or benefit me financially directly as a commissioner? That's pretty easy. The second one is an indirect pecuniary interest, financial interest, where perhaps this benefits your employer. So that could be another potential conflict of interest. The other two are personal interest. Direct personal interest would be you're making a decision on a matter that perhaps benefits a family member, not financially, but a matter that they find greatly important. And the last one is perhaps where a commissioner or board of commissioner belongs to an organization and they feel somehow the desire to help further the wishes of that organization. So those are different types of scenarios where there might be a conflict of interest. Under the state statutes, it is up to the individual planning commissioner or board of commissioner, if they feel they have a conflict of interest, to declare that conflict of interest and not participate in the discussion or the vote. Now, if the commissioner does not feel they have a conflict of interest, that they don't have a pecuniary interest and any personal interest would not cause them, somehow compromise their ability to be fair and impartial, then that's great. But they still should declare that before the commission. For instance, Commissioner Rundy did absolutely the right thing at the last hearing by stating, this is where I live. I have neighbors who have strong feelings on the Kroll application. I just want the board to be aware of that. That was exactly what should happen. She doesn't feel she has a conflict of interest, and that's where it ends unless any other commissioner feels differently. At any time, a board member or commission member can bring a motion to recuse another if they feel that that particular commissioner should not participate in discussion.
Well,
Yes.
the reason this is coming up again is I received a phone call from a gentleman who lives on Wilderness Canyon Road. Now, I don't know what mile marker, this property is located. Wilderness Canyon is between mile marker 59 and 58. But this gentleman wanted to set up a meeting among me, he, and the man from the School of Mines who was here last time. And I explained to him, I said, sir, you should come to the meeting, write a letter, whatever. They said, well, we want you to know. I said, listen, I said, I am neutral. And if you talk to me, I don't want you to think that I would be your advocate one way or the other. We ended the conversation with the gentleman saying he was going to contact the School of Mines man to set up a meeting, and I don't want to meet with them, okay? I don't want to, and, I live right off of Wilderness Canyon Road, so this man lives, less than half a mile from me, so I'm becoming concerned with all of my neighbors in their position, attempting to influence my position. And I'm trying to tell them, until I hear all the facts, I can't I can't give an opinion. So I was hoping maybe there was a rule that said, no, I can't meet with you.
Well, and that's the second issue I want to address here. Again, Commissioner Rundy did has taken exactly the correct action, and it's a perfect example how the commission and the board should handle these matters. She had a question asked, well, she felt she did not have a conflict of interest, but she fully informed this commission so they themselves, if they felt differently, could bring a motion to recuse her. So raise the issue if there's any question in your mind, and then say, I do not feel I have a conflict of interest. I feel I can be fair and impartial. Done. If the board or the commission feels differently, they bring a motion. End of story. Now then from there you have the issue of the ex parte communications. The statute, can't give you a rule that says you aren't allowed to meet with them, but your concerns are very valid. There's no rule that prohibits you from meeting with a member of the community. There is no rule that requires you to meet with a member of the community to sit down and discuss a matter that's pending before the commission for a decision. With that being said, any information that's shared with you is evidence that should be considered by the commission and at the board level by the board as a whole. So if you do make it, whether it's invited by a member of the public or uninvited, it's something you take on your own to maybe go visit a site visit. That's not uncommon. Or maybe someone sends you an email. Emails are easy because emails can be included in the board packet or the commission packet. But the point is anything that is substantive in nature should be shared at the time of the hearing so that the entire commission is fully informed and the public is informed and other interested parties may weigh in on that issue. The applicable statute, and this particular chapter of South Dakota law deals with acts and records of local officials, and it's 6-1-20, and it states, if an officer relies upon any evidence not produced at a public hearing or meeting, the officer shall disclose the evidence publicly and include the information in the public record to afford all parties an opportunity to respond or participate. So it shouldn't be a matter of just from the dais saying, oh, by the way, I went and did a site visit and I spoke to the neighbor. The content of that communication should be shared with the commission and the public as a whole. And that's the concern with ex parte communications, is that perhaps that information is not shared, and that's the purpose of a public hearing, so all the evidence can be weighed. And so in this instance, you didn't feel comfortable. It obviously is a very controversial issue, and you want to remain fair and impartial. And if after you have a conversation, ex parte communication with someone, you feel that has somehow inhibited your ability to be fair and impartial, or creates a question as to a conflict of interest, then at that point in time, you should recuse yourself.
Well, I'm not interested in listening to these two men talk to me for 30 minutes nonstop and then feel an obligation or a requirement to come and regurgitate everything they say.
And
I'm not real happy with
yeah, and
the
certainly,
situation.
yeah, and
So I
certainly,
thank you for your input. I'm going to not meet with them.
and certainly, as we previously stated, you can invite them to submit their comments in
And
written
I
form.
did so
Yeah.
several times on this phone call. I was quite, he didn't give me any information, but I told him repeatedly to either show up, write a letter, send an email, do something, but don't anticipate that I would be their advocate one way or another.
And that's very good, because that's another thing to keep in mind. Again, Commissioner Rundy is really making all the right, she's posing all the right questions and making all the correct decisions. When you do meet with a member, and I don't want to say constituent because you're an appointed body, you do not have a constituency. But when you do meet a member of the public or a site visit, it's important, certainly listen, but it's important not to form an opinion, and it's important for you not to make a promise or give any indication on how you're going to vote on a particular issue.
Thank you.
Just out of curiosity, is there a distinction to be made between our responsibilities and those of the Board of Commissioners? One is a political body, the other one is, as you say, a quasi-judicial one, even though the board seems to function in some ways as a judicial body also. But anyway, is there a distinction? In other words, if I'm a constituent, and is it appropriate for me to approach my, commissioner, and should he be receptive to my concerns, or should he say, "Oh no, I can't do that," because we're going to make a judgment here?
No, I want to make it very clear that, first of all, both the commission and the Board of Commissioners sits as a quasi-judicial body. Whether you're appointed or elected, many of your decisions are quasi-judicial, because they immediately impact land use. So the types of actions that are not quasi-judicial are legislative actions, where you're considering the passing or the amendment of an ordinance. With that being said, I want to emphasize that I don't want to discourage anyone from meeting with members of the public. This body is appointed, you don't have a constituency. You essentially have a responsibility to all the citizens of Pennington County, just as the Board of Commissioners do, but they have a little bit, they do also have constituency within their district that they may have a closer relationship to. But I do not want to discourage anyone from making site visits or speaking to citizens who pick up the phone and talk to you or want to meet with you. The intent is to let you know that anything substantive in nature on that issue absolutely needs to be shared with the commission at the public hearing, so everyone can weigh in. And in this situation, I don't want, Commissioner Rundy feels uncomfortable given the circumstances and how controversial this particular issue is. She would prefer to have those comments in writing, and that's fair too. So again, I don't want to discourage you. I just want to let you know that it's your decision whether you speak to someone, and that any substantive communications need to be shared.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Lloyd.
Senator, I think, what I do personally, if it's high profile or controversial thing, I don't do that. I don't meet with them one-on-one for the simple fact that if I've got questions I want to ask in front of everybody, I don't have the shadow of a doubt coming forward that you met with so-and-so and didn't meet with this. So I have no problem just as you did, telling people, I'm sorry, I can't meet with you because it's unfair. I'll go look at the property on my own, and I've done this, drove through when they wanted to meet with me to get my vision and see what I need to do. But that's just me personally, and I think there's some other commissioners who, or even other people who like to go visit and talk to us. It all depends on the situation, you understand that. But just from my own point of view, I'd like to have it up here in front of all the commissioners and in front of everybody when it's controversial, because then we all hear the same thing.
Sure.
It's
Yeah,
not,
I hear you.
I heard this and I'm telling you, and I could repeat what they said and it may be wrong, but that's just me. I think you did the right thing and I appreciate you bringing that up.
Well, thank you for your comments.
All right, any further?
We beat that up.
All right. Item C, PJ.
Last item for items from the staff, planning department job descriptions. We're changing the job title and job description for TJ Dorff, our on-site wastewater treatment specialist. Well, actually, that's going to be the new title. He's environmental planner one now. He's to be promoted to a planner two come January. So we figured this would be a good time to actually change the job title, kind of streamline what the job duties are. Still be supervised by Brittany under that portion of the office under the environmental side. So kind of like our ordinance officer who takes in complaints and then goes out and inspects those. This item will be specifically for on-site wastewater treatment systems. He'll still be working with operating permits, on-site inspections, and handling all the complaints that come in. So I've already talked to the human resources director about this, and he's on board with it. He's just going through the paperwork right now to bring it before the board to have it officially done.
All right, any questions? All right, that takes us to item 26, items from the membership. Anybody have anything? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Don't move.
I'll second.
Motion and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you all.
Thank you.